It's Wednesday night, RFM.
Yes, it is. And we're running late. What's the story on that, Mr. Reel?
It is. Our guest had a little issue with a computer, but she switched computers and we have her. So Here we go. Really quick, just to check in, any thoughts that you have before we get started on the show, my friend?
Do I have any thoughts?
Anything going on in your world you want to say? Anything?
So much. I'm working hard on the book. I want you to know that.
Love it.
I had kind of slacked off. I announced that a few months ago, and then I sort of slacked off because just people, they email me or they message me, and I enjoy it so much. It's hard for me to resist the temptation. So even though I said I wouldn't, I did, and I'm only human. But now I've really got to try and focus on this book and putting this thing together and getting it out. My goal is by the end of the year to have it done. We'll see if that happens.
Radio Free Mormon's biography.
Yeah, the
autobiography.
The title is The Mormon Who Knew Too Much.
The Mormon Who Knew Too Much. I love it. I love it. Well, folks, leave RFM alone so he can get his book done. I'll play the bad cop.
Thank you. I'm working as hard as I can.
Yeah. Well, super cool. I'm excited to read it. That'll be a great time. I think when you do publish that, maybe I can have the first interview with you.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see about that, Mr. Reel.
Don't push your
luck.
luck.
Have a bidding war is what we'll have. Okay.
All right. That sounds fair enough. Well,
absolutely. You get first dibs on every part of me.
I love it. All right. Let me take this off the screen. I'm going to bring Sarah on. Sarah Steed, how are you doing this fine day?
I am amazing. Thanks for being patient with me, everybody.
Yeah, no worries.
Technology, is hard.
Yep. Your tech was working, and then suddenly when you came on last minute for the show here, rather than the times where you checked it out and tested it, suddenly it stopped working, but we've got everything up and running now. So here we are. We're really excited to have you. And folks, I'll let you introduce yourself, Sarah, and let the audience know whatever background you want to share and what prompted you to start blogging and writing posts and articles. And then we'll jump into showing some folks some of the things you've written, and asking some questions, giving you a chance to share some what I would call philosophy with us. So I'm really excited.
I love that. Well, my name is Sarah Steed. I am a writer. I love to write. I've written for a long time, mostly in my journal. I've been trying to write a book for years. And it just magically started like back in April of this year. I had this day where I was like, I made this goal to just do whatever my intuition kind of urged me to do that particular day. And I just kept on having these thoughts about this certain topic. And I just decided, I didn't even decide. I was trying to work out in my basement, and I had these thoughts. So I just pulled open my app on my notes app and just started writing. It was this particular piece that I was writing turned out to be about Joseph Smith. And so after I wrote it, I was like, this is pretty good. I want to share it. I was just going to send it to family members. And then I had heard of this, social media platform, I guess, it's for writers. It's called Substack. So I'm like, you know what? No one knows me on there. I'm just going to get on there and I'm going to post it on there and see what happens. But at the very end, when you post on Substack, it gives you the option to share on your social media accounts. And I hadn't been on a ton on Facebook. So I thought, I'm going to share it on there. No one really knows me. If they do, it's from like my past or whatever. So I posted on there, and I go out and I feed my chickens and I'm doing things. And then I start to think about all these people that I know. They started popping up in my head, and I'm like, oh, I think they follow me on Facebook. I think they follow, and then I started shame spiraling of like, oh gosh, I shouldn't, when you share your writing and it's personal and they're your own thoughts. And I had posted it with such a whim that I started feeling scared. So I decided I was going to come in the house and take it off of my Facebook. And at that point, I get a call from one of my girlfriends from college, and I answer it on my way back to my computer. And she's just like, Sarah, I saw on Facebook you posted, and I read it and it was good. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to erase it. Just don't worry about it. And she's like, no, leave it up. People are commenting. And I spent the rest of the day reading people's comments and responding because I really got a good response, and it was fun. And it made me desire to write more of these essays that just come from within, just me answering my own questions that I have, or trying to explore different perspectives of how to answer those questions. And yeah, that's kind of how it was born, as far as writing on Substack and writing these essays and articles and posting them on there and on social media. So,
well, I will say that the way I came across you was my girlfriend sent me one of your blog posts, and I don't remember which one because I've been looking through all of them, and found, as you just said, I mean, you said, I think this is pretty good. I'll say you write really good. And
thank
I
you.
think you explore ideas in such a way that we all can learn something from that. And so when she sent that, I went off and read that blog. And again, I've read the others since. And I put together tonight a slideshow to highlight several articles. I'll synopsize them for you, the audience, so that you guys will know what the gist of that is. And then we've got some questions that I think will allow us to dig into some of this philosophy around Mormonism. And I think we'll have a fun time playing in the sandbox tonight. So
Awesome.
Can I tell
I'm
Sarah
excited.
3 things?
yes.
Hi, RFM here, Sarah. Nice to
Hi.
meet you.
Good to meet you too.
Thanks for introducing us, Bill. Anyway,
Sarah, this is Mr. Radio Free Mormon. Radio Free Mormon, this is Sarah Steed.
pleasure to
It's
make
a
your
pleasure.
acquaintance. Thank you. That first article that you wrote about Joseph Smith, I think it was a Saturday, and the kids were with their dad, so you were alone at home with the
Yep.
dumbbell,
Yep.
which was in your hand.
Yeah.
And and the third thing, it was so that you know that I read it.
You did. Yeah.
And the third
Yeah.
thing is, I thought that it was very well done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just trying to
What-
make sense of questions that I've had and people in my life have had, and, writing it all down. And hopefully, I write for myself, but I'm always hopeful that it helps other people as well.
To what do you attribute your felicity with words? How come you're such a good writer?
Thank you. First of all, I'm going to take that in.
Oh, you get used to it, okay? You'll be hearing a lot more of it.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like words are magical, and for me, I love people, and I love expressing and explaining and trying to understand what make people tick. And the way to do that is to write about them. And I feel like when a writer can accurately depict either a personality or a scene that really draws people in, I feel like that is the epitome of magic. And I try to do that with my writing. Not always successful. I'm constantly rewriting what I write. I mean, I'll even post stuff on Substack, and then I'll go back and read it, and I'll revise it and revise it. So I feel like you can never finish a writing, especially because I'm a recovering perfectionist. So then I just have to stop reading what I write. But I spend a lot of time in what I write. Unfortunately, it doesn't just come out of me the way I present it online. It takes draft after draft after draft. I wish I was one of those writers that it just flowed, naturally out of me the way it shows up on paper or on a person's screen, but it doesn't. It takes time.
Once we get through I was going to say, once we get through the first piece, I'll want to follow up with you and ask you where you get your poetic flair from.
Yeah. When you said you're a recovering perfectionist, I was going to say Mormonism called and said you're welcome.
Yeah. I blame them.
Yeah.
I blame them. And my mom. But I've learned a lot from being a perfectionist, So
Well, let's jump into it. So I'm going to put here up on the screen. There's our thumbnail, and that's not the one I want. I want this one. Here we go. All right. So this is the first article. This is for all eternity. On the left-hand side, by the way, to the audience, on the left-hand side is just the top portion, maybe the top third or half of Sarah's writing for this particular topic, this particular title of For All Eternity. I've got a really short synopsis on the right-hand side that I'll just read so that the audience can get the gist of what it is that you're delving into here. And then on the following slide, I've got a quote up, and maybe on the next two, actually, I think, but a quote up that caught my eye. And then a question I hope that goes along with that and can sort of help us facilitate what I think will be a really fascinating conversation. And so I'm going to take the comments off the screen, folks. Sorry about that. So I don't know why it says that, but anyway, so the one you wrote here is called For All Eternity. And it starts as a simple dinner with a recently divorced guy who's grieving the end of his eternal marriage. And from there, you go deep, questioning what eternity actually means and how the church's version of forever can feel more like a cage than a promise. You talk about your own temple marriage, how you believed if you just did everything right, happiness would last forever. And then it falls apart, and you realize that eternity isn't something you get from sealing, but rather it's something you earn through growth, truth, and courage. By the end, you completely flip the script. You're not rejecting eternity, you're redefining it. You say real eternity isn't a contract, it's a transformation, the kind of wisdom that outlives illusion and leaves you more whole than you were before. Anything you want to say about this that would help the audience in any way? Otherwise, I'll move on to the quote and a question, and we can have an interesting conversation.
Yeah, go ahead and move on to the quote, and let's have the conversation. I think that'd be great.
So the quote that caught my attention here in this one was, the absurd truth is that eternity doesn't hinge on the person beside you, but by what is left within you. And I thought that's beautiful. So you talk about eternity as something that can actually be edited, that growth and honesty can outlast any ceiling. That's a gutsy take. How does that idea mess with the church's obsession with forever marriage? And what does it say about how we confuse just hanging in there with the actual action of being holy? Your thoughts?
Yeah, you'll see, I like to edit my life, and I like to edit doctrine, if you will, just to make it fit essentially the way I think in my life. As far as the word eternal, I think eternal can feel both sacred, but it also can feel suffocating, especially for individuals that have gotten divorced. It just kind of depends on where you're standing. But I wrote this particular piece because, like you said, I had an eternal marriage. And when mine ended, I had to kind of redefine eternity, what eternity actually meant for me under the circumstances I was in. And yeah, I had met this really kind, broken man in a lot of ways who couldn't stop grieving his own eternal marriage. And in our conversation, he spoke as if he'd lost like his place in heaven. And I remember sitting there thinking, if forever means, or eternity means staying bound to suffering, maybe it's not heaven we're losing, maybe it's this illusion that we've had about it. And so, I mean, it reminds me of, I served a mission in Russia. And when I tell people, about the plan of salvation and that they can be with their families forever, they always looked horrified and they'd say, I don't want that for myself, and it baffled me at my, the age of 21. But then after my own marriage, I got it. And the reason why I got it is that I think eternity, it doesn't sound so romantic when you're in a relationship that feels like survival, because at that point, forever starts to feel, in a lot of instances, like a prison sentence. And so, I don't think real eternity is about contracts or even certificates. I think it's what is left standing after the illusions of this world kind of burn away. And truthfully, I just think eternity is more about growth than it is about anything else. I think it's about truth. I think it's about courage. And it's something that you don't necessarily earn. I think it's something that we are in this moment, in every moment. And that to me is the kind of eternity that is real. And that's how I rewrite things in my head.
Yeah, I think this is maybe why all of Shakespeare's comedies end with marriage. You don't go beyond the marriage. It wouldn't be a comedy then.
That's true. All paths lead to the temple, marriage, that's what I learned growing up. So I think that marriage can make or break a person. But I think the beautiful thing about it is whether it survives or doesn't, I think there's a lot to learn from those relationships.
Sarah, I'm 65 years old. Say it loud, say it proud.
I love it.
But I've come to the point where I'm thinking that just having two people, a man and a woman, any two people stay together for their whole lives is asking an awful lot. What do you think?
Well, yeah, especially if you have decided in your 20s to get married, let's say, when your brain isn't even fully developed yet. And we think that decision that we made at that early stage of our adulthood or young adulthood should continue for eternity. I mean, that's a huge decision that we're making.
You play with this idea in a couple of other blog posts or stack posts that I put into this slideshow tonight. But the quote here, the absurd truth is that eternity doesn't hinge on the person that you're with, essentially, but what is left within you. And I think you're hitting on something, because on one hand, all of us in the church, when we were in that sort of orthodoxy, we had partnered up with somebody, and come hell or high water, good marriage or not, love there, love not, attraction there, attraction not, we're going to make this thing work no matter what. And you hit on this and other ones as well, but you sort of console yourself to, like, my job is to suffer through this, and then on the other side, something will be better.
Yeah.
Now, with the idea that maybe there's nothing better on the other side too, that there's other things going on. But the other side of the coin to that quote is that Mormonism puts that on you for sure. It definitely wants you to feel that drudgery of just gotta pound this marriage out and make it work come hell or high water. But they also teach the other side of it, which is, people go through the church not married. And there's this idea that somebody out there, who the hell cares who it is, as long as they're righteous, somebody's going to be provided to you and you'll have an eternal mate. So Mormonism tells you on some level, it really doesn't matter who the person is. You just need to get there with someone, or get there and then get someone who is good in the Mormon way and checks all the boxes and does the things. But I just want to say, try to conclude that with a question, is Mormonism puts a lot of pressure on people to show up a certain way and to feel the weight of making a bad marriage last. And what was the moment where you sort of felt free to question that construct and to move outside of it?
It took a long time and a lot of guts. And the reason why I stayed in my marriage as long as I did, which was 12 years, which is not as long as other people, but it was that Mormon, or the teachings that told me, we're married for eternity. We're going to be together forever. I owe this to my children. This is the commitment I made. I stick to my commitments. And it took me getting to a really low place to realize that, like, whoa, this isn't there's no way. Eternity to me means eternal growth. And if I'm supposed to be with this person for eternity and grow together for eternity, I was not even growing within that relationship. It was more like I was treading water, and I wasn't even treading water very well. I was flailing. I think that's a perfect word for what I was doing. Because in that experience, I was just trying to survive from day to day. And when you're in survival, you're not expanding, you're not progressing. And that's the whole point of, the gospel is to progress. And look, I'm not rejecting the idea of eternal bonds. I think it's beautiful, but especially this piece that I wrote, I was trying to expand it, to think of eternity from a place where it's already happening now, because truly in my marriage it was, because we were making that decision at relatively a young age, and then every lesson and every decision at that point reshapes everything, the rest of your life. It even reshapes your soul. And I honestly don't think God's afraid of our growth. I think we're the ones that are. And for so long, I believed that forever meant endurance. And the church really does teach women that if I stay, if I was sweet enough, if I was forgiving enough, if I just, whatever, if I did it all perfectly, I would earn some celestial reward, right? And when the marriage came crumbling down, I realized eternity isn't given across the altar. It's something that's earned from experience. Because life isn't about performing forever, which is essentially what I was doing in my relationship. It's about transforming, right? So we can only transform through experience. And so that experience was a beautiful thing, right? Even though it was incredibly difficult, but that's where eternity really lives from my perspective, is in what stays with you after maybe a marriage ends, or even a church experience. You're standing in the church ends. In the church, divorce still really reads like failure in a lot of ways, but I actually don't see my divorce as that at all. I see it in a way that I see it as wildly successful, because even though I would describe it as a nightmare, and that's being kind. I see it as a success, and I still see it as an eternal marriage, because I learned eternal lessons, clarity, courage, boundaries, which I never had those. I learned self-respect. Those are lessons that are eternal, and I can take with me into the eternities. And so I think that that's more valuable, in my opinion, than any sealing certificate. So yes, my eternal marriage did end, but the eternal part, the growth, the truth, the becoming that happened to me remains. And so it was a miracle. I feel like the whole experience was beautiful, and surviving it and learning from it is exactly what eternity is.
When it tells you to endure to the end, that already communicates that this is going to be drudgery. It already communicates that you're not going to like this. You really got to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Because if it was enjoyable, even with some hard moments, if it was just enjoyable, we wouldn't need to endure to the end. It would just be what we'd want to do every day, is get up and do that thing. The other quote in this article, in your writing here, that caught my eye was this one: eternity feels romantic until you realize it's a very long time to be wrong. And I remember thinking this thought in Mormonism, okay, the church has problems with its history. The church has issues with how it treats other people. And I'm beginning to wonder if it's true. And I thought, no, but it's got to be true. I said a prayer about it. I got an answer from God. And then the thought crossed my mind, well, if you're wrong, this is a lot of time to spend in the wrong thing. And so I put here, in Mormon culture, divorce still feels like a moral failure. You clearly push through the shame narrative. What helped you do that? And what would you say to women who still think walking away means losing their eternal worth? So there are women out there in the church doing the Mormon thing, and it is drudgery, and it's not happy, and it's not good, and maybe there's unhealthiness in the relationship that is abusive, or at least borderline abusive, but they got to keep doing this Mormon thing because that's what they promised to do since they were a little kid. Your thoughts?
Yeah. What I would say to those women, what I said to myself when I was in that situation was, yeah, my covenant that I made was sacred, right? But so is my sanity, and so is your safety. If forever is going to kill you, it's not divine. God doesn't need more martyrs, right? And I even saw myself as like this martyr for endurance. He doesn't need women like that anymore. I think we're done with those days. He needs women who are alive. and who are living on purpose, not just surviving. And, you know, in Mormon culture, like you said, we really do treat divorce like this moral failure. But I don't think it's a failure. I think it's honesty. And it wasn't until I was radically honest with myself that I finally got divorced, because I had to realize that faith was not about pretending everything was fine, right? Faith is what survives honesty, and it's what stays standing when everything else falls apart. And so we are raised within the church to see marriage as this ultimate symbol of worthiness. But what happens when that marriage becomes unlivable? That same theology that once blessed you now blames you, right? And so I think in many ways, women within the church have mistaken endurance for like some sort of holiness in a way, even if it means that they literally have to erase themselves. But eternity should not, like, it should not entomb you, right? Or a marriage should not entomb you. It should expand you. And so that's why I still believe in eternal things. Yes, I do, but not forever as in the way it's taught. So my eternity now is tied to, it's not tied to one man, and it's not tied to the promises I make over the altar. It's tied to the woman I've become because of it. And so, you know, I would just say to any woman that's in this experience is, God wants you to be happy. And if that means, and God wants you to be safe and your children. So, but just because a marriage ends doesn't mean eternity ends. And it's just kind of an edit or a reframe, right? And so, yeah.
Okay, please finish your sentence. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I would just tell them to listen to their intuition, because I think that is the strongest thing that women have, is the intuition. And I think for me, I was taught to listen to other people, you know, listen to my bishop, listen to the prophet, listen to your parents, listen to your husband, even.
Anything but your voice, unless your voice agrees with all of them.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, RFM, there was a time where you were active in the church, going every week. You were determined to be a great Mormon, and then suddenly you're either not going, or at least not going as much. Did you have a similar thing where you felt like it was, why spend so much time in a thing that may not be true or is not true?
That's a pain in the ass to deal with and doesn't want me there anyway. Yeah. That was like the 1-2 punch that finally knocked me out of the pew. It's not just boring to be there. It had become over decades oppressive to be in church, to hear things for not the millionth time, but the millionth and first time. And it just was a place that it was like me walking through the front door was like putting the south pole of a battery and the south pole of a battery together, right? You know, or the north pole together, and they won't go together because they're pushing each other apart, right? That's me in the church. And then I would still do it, and I found out they didn't want me there anyway. So why am I knocking myself out?
Yeah. I also think too, to some of what Sarah said, Mormonism, because it benefits Mormonism pressures all of us to get married super quickly. The science says that you should date 17 people before you have a really good feel for what it is you're looking for in another person, what's a good fit for you, who you are, and how you're going to handle what comes up with other people. Trying to find someone that's compatible to what is best for you to live your, a life where you can feel contentment and feel like you've got the support of another person. But when you marry young, you don't even know who you are yet. You don't have anything figured out. And I have to imagine, because the divorce rate is so low in Mormonism with temple marriages, at least that's what they tell us. I don't know what the data is definitively, but what the church says is that when someone has a temple marriage, there's so much less divorce. But I have to wonder, because people are pressured to marry young and to stay together, how much dysfunction and incompatibility there are in those eternal relationships. Any thoughts from either of you?
I mean, yeah, I actually took a different approach in that after I got home from my mission, I didn't want to get married. I wanted to start my career, which I did, and was very successful in it. And once I hit 25, I was 25, I was feeling so much pressure from my family and from my community to get married that I moved to a different state because it was so irritating. I moved to a different state, and then out there, I'm dating and whatnot. And by the time I'm 27, I start to think, oh my gosh, I'm 27. Like I'm an old maid now. Like, what if I never get married? What if I never have kids? And the programming starts clicking in, it's like, I'm not going to be valuable anymore. And I literally thought that. And so I ended up meeting my husband, getting married when I was, I think, almost 29. But what is interesting to me, and I didn't even think through this, tells you right there that the programming that really kind of takes over is that I, had this business that was very, that had taken off, that I was doing very well. And yet I shut it down and put it into my past, because I felt like as soon as I got married and I got pregnant after we were married, I thought, oh my gosh, okay, I need to support my husband in his dreams and in his endeavors, because that's what we are taught. We're taught all paths lead to the temple. And then at that point you're married, and then they kind of don't tell you anything beyond that. It's just kind of endure to the end, right? And at that point for me, it was like, oh, I hearken to my husband. He hearkens to God. I support my husband in his dreams. And so I kind of put mine on the back burner. Not even kind of, I definitely put mine on the back burner, because for me, it was like, okay, you're now married. So you're now going to be a mother. And although motherhood for me has always been my highest and holiest calling, I do believe that. I've loved it. It's been my greatest honor. But I do think it's what kind of perpetuated the toxic dynamic within my marriage, because at that point there was not this equal power within my relationship. And if there's an individual in a relationship that takes advantage of that, it can create toxicity. So even though, yes, I still made the decision to get married within my 20s, I didn't necessarily take the approach that most women took. However, as soon as I got married, that programming definitely took over.
Yeah. We're about 40 minutes in. We've got just one of these essays touched. So I'm going to try to interject last, because this next one I think is punchy. This one is The Ghost of Polygamy's Past. And again, we're just sharing the image of the article. It's just the very first part of it. So Sarah Steed, this was back in September of 25, The Ghost of Polygamy's Past. It says, look, polygamy didn't really die in the 1800s. And I think when you connect this to pornography, I think this is brilliant. Polygamy didn't really die in the 1800s. It just changed its outfit. It's not a historical artifact sitting in a museum somewhere. It's alive and well in the way that women are still taught to endure instead of ask, to submit instead of be seen, and to call that holiness. You draw this really haunting line between early plural marriage and the way modern LDS women still live in emotional scarcity, competing for crumbs of affection, caring more than their share and thinking that's faith. And you pull no punches when you tie it to pornography and half-present husbands, calling porn polygamy on a 24/7 loop. It's brutal and honest, but it hits. And by the end, you're not just talking about the past, but are talking about the here and now, about how women are finally done folding themselves into smaller shapes just to fit inside a system built for someone else's comfort. And that's Mormonism. Women are a thing given to men if they serve their missions hard enough, if they're righteous enough if they keep the commandments and do all the things and check all the boxes. And so I thought that was brilliant too. About how women are finally folding. I'm sorry. Hit me next sentence over. You call it love's counterfeit, and you say it's time we stop romanticizing endurance as devotion. It's raw, and again, there's that endurance as devotion again. It's raw, it's redemptive, and it's one of those essays that left me thinking, yeah, maybe the real restoration is just women finally breathing again. And the quote here: "Men still practice polygamy. They just don't bother introducing you to the other women." Now, Joseph Smith didn't introduce Emma
True.
to the other women anyway, but from that point forward, it was like, first wife, get on and take it, because this is what's happening. And the men did polygamy. You make this gutsy connection between old school polygamy and modern pornography, basically saying it's the same dynamic in new packaging. I want you to talk about that. How has porn and LDS marriages become this quiet version of plural wives where men still get variety, but women are expected to stay faithful to the loneliness?
Yeah. And this one was personal for me. I wrote it because I realized polygamy, it didn't just end, it just went digital, obviously. And this piece isn't, it's not the fact that this, that today's church still practices plural marriage, but it's the psychological and the emotional template that they still practice. That never ended, in my opinion. So polygamy, I don't think it didn't just shape marriages, it shaped women's nervous systems. And I go into detail about that in this article, but the theology evolved, but the muscle memory didn't. That stayed. I mean, you look around, you look in the church, and there's so many women that I know where polygamy's fingerprints are all over us. In marriages built on that silent endurance, in women praised for how gracefully they can suffer. That's a big one. In the way, like, the emotional neglect is still spiritualized as loyalty. Staying quiet, staying grateful, sacrificing, serving. We like to treat polygamy like it's a relic, but it still is in our bodies. I felt that. I saw it in myself and many of my friends. So this is, I think you can see it the most. If a woman is grateful for crumbs, then that its fingerprints are all over you. So we call, like, this exhaustion within our relationships faith, and we think that that's the real inheritance, I believe, of polygamy, because it institutionalized the idea that love is like this limited commodity that men get to distribute whenever they want, and us women just have to kind of compete for. And that theology, to me, seeps into modern womanhood, because we have to not only be enough, but we have to forgive enough, and we have to stay enough constantly, because we're competing against pixels. And so love then becomes this rationalized resource, kind of like a spiritualized capitalism, right? And so I refer to that polygamy as like this new version of, or I refer to pornography as a new version of polygamy. It's not just sharing your husband's body, it's literally sharing his attention. And we're sharing that attention often with screens. So that's how I felt. I around that time in September, I had read some articles about polygamy, and I was like, dude, I've lived this. I've lived this. And so many women have lived this. I just felt like this kindred understanding of these women that had to share their husbands with other women. And yes, we didn't know who Joseph's other wives were, but they had names. They had addresses. Nowadays we don't even know. I mean, half of these women don't even I don't know. Do they even exist? I don't know. Whether they're pixels, whether they're real, whether they're not, we don't even know their names. They probably don't have names. I don't know. But it's an interesting dynamic that we have to live through in this modern age.
100%. The other one here, the system, and by the way, RFM, please jump in at any moment you want. The quote here is, the system didn't teach women to love. It taught them the art of staying, the sacred performance of making a bad arrangement look holy enough to keep. And I think you've already touched on this, so maybe you've already addressed this, but Mormonism loves to frame female suffering as a kind of spiritual badge. Like, if it hurts, it must be holy. What would it look like if women flipped that script and said, you know what? Leaving, saying no, or just breathing, and there's that breathing again, might actually be a holier move. Your thoughts on that? This idea that and again, you've already touched on it, but if you want to say any more, that enduring to the end is the thing that we're all asked to do. And I think it weighs on women more than men, for sure. But all members of the church, I've often felt like we're allowed to grow up to maybe the age of a teenager, a 15-year-old. And then the church prefers that we stay there the rest of our lives, and encourage, it really does encourage us to stay stagnant, because the things it calls growth or progress or development aren't those things at all. Any additional thoughts you have on this?
Yeah, I don't think ending polygamy in 1890 was enough. I think we have to end the mindset that made it possible, right? And that mindset is the one that rewards women for being agreeable or submissive, and for men to be untouchable. And I think the most radical thing a woman can do in this culture is to stop romanticizing her own suffering, and to, because for generations our foremothers believed that faith meant disappearing, and the pain. And so I just think that faith now means staying visible. So when I wrote about polygamy and this concept, I really wanted to tap into the inheritance that women received as a result of it. And the church has really taught us to stay. We've covered this, but maybe I think that at this point, God is trying to teach women to stand. And the story of women in this faith has always been about resilience, but resilience shouldn't be our only language, right? I think for women, the next chapter is reclamation. And I think we're kind of starting to see this in an odd way, where there's been a huge, vast amount of women that have left the church. There has been a lot of women that have gotten divorced and choose to stay single. And then there's this male loneliness epidemic, right? I think all of that has to do truly, and this is my opinion, with the fact that pornography and the insidiousness that it's created within relationships, meaning that you literally can't have a relationship when it's infected it, and has created these offshoots, these weird dynamics that are happening within our culture. And so for women, because I'm a woman, I can only speak to women, I guess, for women. But I think some of the holiest things that we can do is just leave. And that's not wrong. Everyone deserves to have a quality relationship where you don't have to share your husband, whether it's with the pixels or whether it's with other women's bodies or whether it's even with your mother-in-law, right? It's this, and we can leave. We don't need to endure. And because that feels like hostage training in a way, right? But I do think that women standing up is what's going to change that dynamic.
Yeah, it is going to take the women in the church doing something different. And by the way, this issue isn't just inside the church. I mean, there are a lot of folks who have left Mormonism, and the guys are still doing some form of polygamy when it comes to pornography.
Right.
And so, it takes away from obviously the relationship, but the wife is often left not getting the attention, and maybe some sort of false expectation set on all the stuff that's out there, and all the all the things that show up in pornography that set a false expectation for, I think, the man, what the woman has to keep up with. Again, you've got all these, beautiful women, beautiful bodies, whatever it is that men go chase the thing, and it all happens in a way that isn't how a normal relationship works. And so I think it makes not just a relationship dysfunctional, but I think creates dysfunction within each human being too. The next one you've got here is the trouble with being perfect. And you tell this story about your bishop showing up unannounced, and we've all dealt with that, dropping the "Be ye therefore perfect" scripture, which only makes us sad. Anyway, RFM, please.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. I was just trying to find where you were. Did it say Matthew 5:48?
Well, there's 3 Nephi 12:48.
Yeah, that's where it got it from, was Matthew 5:48.
Yeah, okay. Isn't that weird? Be ye therefore perfect, and leaving like that was supposed to help. And again, I think leaders use that scripture, and all we ever feel as members when that scripture is used is like, I can never do that. I can never do that. You talk about how the verse becomes this soundtrack in Mormon life. Be perfect, and nobody ever explains what that means.
Yeah.
You call out how the pressure turns religion into performance. Everyone's smiling, hiding the mess, pretending perfection equals righteousness. You say that obsession with image killed your marriage, killed intimacy and honesty. Honestly kills community. Then you flip it. You point out that the original Greek word for perfect actually means whole, not flawless. And suddenly the whole message changes. You say, maybe this isn't the plan of happiness. Maybe it's, and I love this, the plan of experience. And good luck getting Mormonism to change that. But it would be so much more interesting if the goal was to develop, learn, try new things, feel safe to make some mistakes without feeling like every mistake makes some perfect man in some garden bleed more profusely, right?
Yeah.
You say, maybe this isn't the plan of happiness. Maybe it's the plan of experience, that real holiness isn't about pretending. It's about growing. And by the end, you redefine perfection as becoming whole, cracks, scars, and all. And you have this quote in there, be perfect, but perfect how? Perfect like never forgetting to floss, or perfect like never disappointing God. And Mormonism gives you a checklist, tells you not to drink coffee, don't drink tea, don't say this, do that. But it's not really about reading books of wisdom. It's not really about getting therapy and overcoming your own unhealthy mechanisms. It's not about learning what are the tools of life and trying to become a better human being. And so I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on how we get, or what it would look like if the church were to shift from this stagnant mode of performance around arbitrary constructs and rather encourage people to truly go learn and be the best human being they can be by really taking on seriously self-development, accountability, learning from others, and experiencing life, which includes making mistakes?
That's a good question, because I think as a whole, we would actually be alive a lot more than we are, rather than glitchy. I call it the glitch. It's like when we slap on that smile and we're like, everything's fine here, nothing to see here, everything's good, don't look too closely, and because we're performing in a lot of ways, and it's exhausting. And I think we would have more energy to put towards spiritual things. I just think that, and I may have even talked about this in the article, is that Jesus even grew from grace to grace, right? Which means that even divinity itself had to learn and to evolve. And maybe if we stopped pretending to be finished products, we would actually be able to grow in ways that we couldn't even fathom. I think our purpose here is not to preserve something perfectly, it's to experience deeply. And that's why that's why I told my bishop that I think that the plan of happiness should be called the plan of experience, because experience is progression, right? It offers the opportunity to grow. And when we hear all the time that it's a plan of happiness, or so to gain salvation, it's the plan of happiness. But in your mind, you think, oh, I got to be happy. So that's when we slap on the smile and pretend everything's fine when it's not. And I just think that's wholeness lives in humanity when we're willing to be completely human. And at that point, I think if we were able to get there as a community and as a religion, we could feel more whole rather than trying to compete constantly against this pressure of performance and perfection.
Yeah. Mormonism does this strange thing where instead of progression as you're defining it, it says, look, you get baptized at 8. If you're a boy, you get the priesthood at 12. You get your patriarchal blessing at 16. You go to the temple when you're 19 and go on a mission. You come back from your mission. You get married in the temple for all eternity at 22.
Yeah.
But the whole time you're stagnant. All you're doing is keeping the rote list of I did my home teaching. I serve in my calling. I go to church every Sunday. And I think it, and again, I want to ask both of you, I wonder if Mormonism does that, at least in part, because if you encourage people to grow in real ways, they would learn much quicker and much more prevalently the shortcomings of your system. And they would discover, when encouraged to learn, they would discover the beautiful world out there and realize that the great spiritual experiences and tools that Mormonism gives you might be heavily lacking when compared with what it's like to truly be alive and experience the world, and to learn from those who really do have some deep wisdom to them. Any thoughts?
I mean, yeah, I took a step back from the church in 2016, and I've always been a seeker. I've always been digging deep with deep doctrine. I was never okay with just the surface stuff that we would get each Sunday. I wanted more. And so I always did a lot of research. I did my own dives, but it always was within the parameter of, what the church approves of as far as doctrine and the teachings. And it wasn't until I started learning about different religions, different mystical traditions, ancient mystical traditions, that my mind was blown. And I just kept on thinking, there was so much I've missed out on. There's this gap between what we are promised in church culture and what actually happens when life doesn't follow that script. And we're raised on all these lessons and these to-do lists and these conditions that come as a result. And listen, I did everything right. Like, I did the temple marriage. I did the mission. I was all of the things. I was the presidents of everything. I self-sacrificed. I kept all the rules, and then life went sideways. And I just think that's not supposed to happen, right? When you're obeying all the rules and you're doing all the things. And so the theology didn't prepare me for reality, and nor does it for a lot of the young women, and in fact, this is probably the conversation for the other one I wrote, that was, what did I call it? Eternity. I don't remember. Eternity isn't forever. I think that was another article I wrote, but that we ill prepare our youth for life when it goes sideways. And but I'll tell you, when it goes sideways, you start thinking outside the box and you start experiencing things that aren't the prescribed order, and it does feel magical. It feels like I was able to breathe for the first time ever, and that was an amazing experience, actually.
You went from the restoration to the respiration.
Or the resurrection even. I was resurrected. Tell me about that. Yeah, and I was able to breathe a lot better for sure.
RFM, as you read some of these, which one stood out to you the most, or
No, don't ask me a question. Ask me no questions, because I already have all these comments I want to make. Don't
Please.
ask me something else.
Well, make some comments.
You did that to me before, and so it's hopelessly past that comments time because I answered your question. I will not do that again. All I want to say is this, okay? In Mormonism, there's only one definition of perfection that we need to promote, that we need to enforce. Perfection is something that you are not and you are never going to be, okay? That's what we have to understand about perfection. Perfection is something that a human being is not, cannot, and will never be. And then if we understand that that's what perfection is, we won't spend our life worrying about not becoming something that by its very definition, we cannot become. It would be like moping around because we can't fly like a bird. We all understand that, but it doesn't drive people to the psychiatrist because we understand we're not a bird. We can't fly. Maybe it'd be cool to fly, but it's just not in the cards for us because we're not a bird. In the same way, we're not perfect. We're never going to become perfect. We're never going to become a bird. And I think that once we learn that we're not perfect, and that's okay because we can't be perfect anyway, then we can finally start living life.
Well, and how boring is it to be perfect? I mean, have you been around anyone that is perfect? They're not fun, meaning they're just boring. I think that the beauty of humanity is that we are all a little quirky and a little off, and that's what makes us fun and interesting,
I'm perfectly quirky.
Yep, me too.
Don't you think Mormonism wants you to feel like perfection is practically unattainable? Meaning that they want us to go through our time in the church feeling this heavy burden that I got to do all these things, and I don't know that I can do it. I'm gonna try, but man, it just feels impossible. And as you said, you used the crumb analogy earlier, but it's like we're just happy to keep picking up little crumbs, being told that maybe at least we're not getting worse. And you're sort of afraid to leave because that might mean getting worse. And so staying at least keeps the status quo. Anyway, I thought I was thinking about that.
That's interesting.
We got us jumping at our own shadows in Mormonism. Because unless you've received the second anointing, ahem, and ain't it great? Unless you've received the second anointing, you're running around because you got no idea what your standing is on Judgment Day.
Yeah.
All you know is that you're going to be judged based on your works, and you've got a lot of them that might count against you. So maybe I won't get into the celestial kingdom. Maybe I will. It's all a toss-up for Mormons.
Yeah. And that can be scary. And sometimes we'll go to great lengths to ensure our salvation in the highest celestial kingdom, to to just kind of squelch that fear of what's to come.
But then I started thinking maybe celestial kingdom is actually just like General Conference on a 24/7 loop. And I started thinking, it might not be all it's cracked up to be. In fact, I'm getting a feeling it won't be.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it. The way they positioned it is it's just going to be more work. It's just Brigham Young said the roads will be paved with gold, but who do you think's going to pave them? It's not going to be Heavenly Father. It's going to be us, and
you have to get the gold out of the fillings of those teeth, those Mormons with the teeth and the gold. Where was that again? I can't remember.
I don't remember, but
do you remember that one? It's a true story. Elder Faust, I think it was.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to grab this next one here. RFM, any other thoughts you've got there that you want to bring up?
That was the main one, because I think that's really, really important that we just understand you can't be perfect. And so just let it go. Jeez.
This next one, you mentioned this. You said, I said this somewhere else. It is this one. When eternity isn't forever, temple ready, but life unprepared. And this one, I think, is a wake-up call. You say the church trains girls for temple marriage and forever families, but never for what happens when forever falls apart. We teach them how to make covenants, not how to survive divorce, betrayal, or abuse, or even how to survive on your own if you happen to not be married at a given moment in your life. You share how you lived that script. You did everything right. You stayed faithful. You supported your husband, and you still ended up unprepared when it all collapsed. And you point out that a lot of LDS women are in the same boat, taught that faith will protect them instead of boundaries, which the church doesn't teach, consent, which the church doesn't teach, skills for independence or independence itself. And by the end, you're not attacking belief, but you're calling for more balance, saying the church can't just preach eternal marriage without teaching real life preparation. You say enduring to the end, which again, I hope folks are seeing the common theme. Enduring to the end shouldn't mean enduring abuse, and that real holiness might look more like a woman who's equipped, independent, and free. And I'll just say the system senses, its leaders since the beginning sense by giving women that might risk the whole thing toppling over. There were 3 quotes here. They all point to, I think this question sort of grabs on all 3 of them, but we were taught to be faithful, not to stand in courtrooms. We were taught to support our husbands, not to recognize narcissism. We were taught to cover our shoulders, but not how to spot gaslighting. And I just again noticed, like, why would a system that I would suggest is deeply unhealthy, why would a system not want to teach you how to spot unhealthiness? I think that's an interesting question. But if the church, and the next quote here is, if the church is going to be in the business of forever, it could be better about getting in the business of preparation. And then the last one here, enduring to the end should not mean enduring abuse, and the eternal family should not come at the cost of women who hold them together. And so you lay out this whole alternate version of Young Women's, one that actually teaches emotional literacy, healthy boundaries, how to set boundaries, how to handle money. By the way, on the Almost Awakened podcast, Teresa and I just did an episode on how to set boundaries and how to recognize unhealthy ones. How to handle money. If that kind of real life prep were part of the program, how do you think it would change the next generation of Mormon girls? So if the church did this, if it taught how to set boundaries, if it taught what the meaning of consent is, if it explained how to spot a narcissist, if it told us how to spot manipulation or gaslighting, what would that mean for the next generation of Mormon girls?
Well, I think that they would be more empowered, that's for sure. And I think that the men that they marry would have to, be empowered as well.
But what would it do to their view of church history?
That's a good question. That's a really good question.
You can't teach Mormons what a narcissist looks like. Otherwise, they'll know what one looks like.
Exactly. And actually, that was some of the comments I got when I posted this. It's like, why would we want to scare young girls and teach them about narcissism or, about abuse? And it's like, how can we not, when that's so prevalent? Like, I understand if it wasn't prevalent, sure, whatever, let's not scare them. But it is. And unfortunately, like I have friends who have gotten divorced and they're in their 40s and they can't even get a credit card because they've never built up credit because it's always been under their husband's, name. And so things like that, where we need to empower girls to, and the reason why I was motivated to write this one is because I knew this was an issue when I was in Young Women's and we were ill prepared, right? And unfortunately, I didn't learn any of this stuff from my parents either, because I just think that that families and the church are so intertwined that we kind of, whatever the church teaches, the families will teach in the home and vice versa. And maybe there's great parents out there that, I had great parents, but maybe there's parents out there that would teach these kind of things. But I don't think I know my parents don't even know what boundaries are, right? And nor did any of us know what narcissism was.
Sarah, Rebecca Biblioteca was just talking the other night about a case. I was covering the story on the newscast about this guy who's got like 180 women, former patients of this gynecologist, accusing of him of taking liberties under the guise of actual therapy.
Yeah.
And it was Rebecca was saying, I was a Mormon girl. Mormon girls, they don't know anything. Nobody tells them anything. They don't know what to expect. They don't know what's right or what's wrong.
No, they don't. And yeah, they don't. And so I think equipping girls both spiritually with and with practical tools is so important, because when we can teach these things to the young women, then it's built on like a prescriptive future, right? Well, not this particular thing, but the way we teach young women right now, it's built on this, like, marriage, mother, homemaking, right? And that female curriculum leaves out that self-preservation. So when you're in a place in your life where you do have to self-preserve, and now you have children that you're in charge of, it can be very scary. And I think the unspoken message is that safety comes through righteousness. Like, this is what we're taught. Safety comes through righteousness and obedience and submitting to your husband. And it doesn't come from boundaries and self-reliance. And truly, the church has a form of stewardship, right? And that stewardship requires them, in my opinion, to prepare girls for all of life, not just the temple day. They need the practical education. And even Jesus himself, he prepared his followers, like, before his death, he prepared them for suffering, and he prepared them for betrayal and for survival. And I feel like the church should do the same.
It really does seem like the members, male and female, but especially female, exist for the church's benefit and use.
Yeah.
The church isn't there for the members. The members exist for the church. At least that's been my experience. By the way, Sarah, can I show you something that you'll really think is interesting? Maybe you've heard of it before.
Yeah.
I was able to look this up. Let me see if I can add this to the stage. Look at that. I think I'm doing it. Church news. This is the archives. This is going back to 1998. Be loyal, worthy to enter temple. Members urged. Who are they urged by? Well, by Elder Faust. President James E. Faust. More than 3,500 people gathered on a mountainside overlooking the southern Brazil city, May 2nd, to witness the ceremonial beginning of construction of the Porto Alegre, Brazil temple. President James E. I'm not reading the whole thing. President James E. Faust, second counselor in the first presidency, presided at the groundbreaking ceremony. Now, let's go ahead and go down here where we're talking about the things that Elder Faust said. He cited Doctrine and Covenants, section 109. He emphasized the need for saints all over the world to begin to sacrifice for temple building. He recalled how, when the Sao Paulo temple was being built, members in Argentina found ways to donate. What ways, you ask? They gave the gold from their dental work to help pay on the temple, said President Faust. He explained that he had purchased some of that gold for more than the market price and has shown the gold fillings to various congregations to illustrate the nature of the sacrifice made by these members. This sacrifice has been the hallmark of the success of members in the Latin American nations, he noted, indicating that the same principle of sacrifice is needed today, where members in one area can reach out to help those in other areas. When I was reading that and I wasn't able to see your reaction. What do you think of that, Sarah? Had you heard of that before?
No, that's tragic. Honestly, it's almost like we're raping the members of, metaphorically, obviously, but like, and members will give everything. I mean, I remember even when we were in Russia, it was really difficult for a member of the church or a Russian in general to find a job, right? And this was right after communism. And we told them, we literally said to them, because this is what we were told to tell them, or we were instructed to tell them this, that if they worked on Sunday, that they needed to quit their job if they had one, because then they would be keeping the Sabbath day holy, and then they would be worthy of blessings. And I feel so, I mean, after the fact, I felt so guilty for, and people did it. They did it because they trusted us. And, you know, I pray that they were taken care of, and I trust that, I hope that they were, but at the same time, there's got to be some sort of common sense when it comes to this kind of thing, especially when you're dealing with members of the church around the world that are poor, extremely poor. I mean, from our angle, when we're in this, you know, beautiful country and we have a lot of opportunity, sure, go quit your job on Sunday. You can find probably another one next week. But when we're asking members of the church to take out their gold fillings to offer those up, I mean,
he tells the story. He takes the gold around with him. He tells this story so much because he's trying to get people to sacrifice just like these other saints. So what are they supposed to take from that message? It seems pretty obvious to me.
Yeah, it is. It's
you go into the temple and you promise to give everything to the building up of, and then I expected to hear kingdom of God, but what was said was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. To the extent where people are having their teeth removed because you're either taking the filling off and now you're exposing a cavity or whatever, or you're having the tooth pulled to give it to, you're giving your teeth. It seems so crazy. By the way,
I feel like you don't take your covenants very seriously, Bill.
I am sorry. About teeth. In this next one, you mentioned something with this directly. The Sunday smile, the hidden weight of LDS manhood. And I really did think this was compassionate. I think this church screws over men and women. And there are plenty of moments to pick on the men and to acknowledge the privilege that they've got and how the system seems set up to have everything in the church, including the women, cater to them. But I also think the men get the short end of the stick in a lot of parts of Mormonism as well. And you tackle part of that here. You say you paint that, let me say it differently. You paint that Sunday scene where we all know white shirts, polished smiles, and say behind them is a quiet kind of suffocation. Boys are taught early that emotion equals weakness. Yeah, and I think that's in the world too. But Mormonism often takes things that are just normal parts of humanity that aren't the best thing for us, and it puts them on steroids.
Well, except during testimony meeting.
Say that again?
I said, except during testimony meeting. Then you can't get them to turn off the waterworks.
No, right. That's right. There are acceptable places for men to cry in the church, huh? Boys are taught early that emotion equals weakness, that real men don't cry or doubt. You call it, and again, there's that breathing. You call it breathing through a spiritual turtleneck. You trace how the pressure follows them into adulthood. Men who do everything right on paper but feel empty inside. They trained to perform faith instead of feel it, to lead with control instead of curiosity. And the fallout is brutal. Loneliness, addiction, silence, even despair. But then you offer hope. These new kinds of men who are breaking the mold, who sit in the pain. Yep, that's part of that process, right? To sit still and just feel the things that are there to feel, to stay soft and to show up with honesty. You say real priesthood isn't about power, it's about presence. And then you end with this perfect line talking about teeth. You don't have to hold it in your teeth anymore. And when I read that line, I clenched my teeth. And I thought, oh yeah, that's what it's like through a lot of Mormonism, is to just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Brene Brown talks about this idea that women expect men to stay on their horse and they can't fall off. If they fall off the horse, some men say, like, I want to be able to be vulnerable. I want to be able to show my emotions. I want to cry like a little baby sometimes because I feel things that are that big. And what a lot of women say is they want room for that, but they don't really.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah, please. Do you want to say anything else about that?
Well, I was just going to say, I think for women, a lot of times we want our men to feel, like you said, but we also want them to be stoic because that makes us feel safe also. So it's this double-edged sword, right?
Uh-oh. You mean I've been fake crying my whole life for nothing?
Well, that's a beautiful thing. It shows that you have presence, right? Rather than performance. Because I think that priesthood in its truest form is presence. I think this concept of patriarchy, that's about performance. But the kind of perfection by composure that men feel comes at a cost. And you can only, clench those teeth for so long before you start mistaking numbness for righteousness. Because I'm telling you, there's so many beautiful men in my life, but so many of them are numb. And they've just kind of had to white knuckle into numbness because, they're not allowed to feel in so many ways. And I think that you truly cannot access the divine power needed within the priesthood while you're pretending not to feel. And that's why I think the waterworks during sacrament meeting is beautiful. I mean, my favorite verse in the scriptures is Jesus wept, because he was the perfect example of emotional fluency. Yet our boys are taught this, that tears equate failure, and they take that into adulthood. And
Jesus was a big softie.
Yeah, he was. We gotta
He'd
learn.
cry at the drop of a hat, that Jesus.
Yeah, he would. And we're trying to be like him, right? So let's do that.
No, not me, because guess what? That violates rule 1 about the definition of perfection.
I agree. But I don't believe that Jesus was perfect. Like we said earlier, he grew grace by grace. I think that he had to become that. And again, perfection in the scriptures means whole, as far as the translation. So he had to grow into wholeness. And that's essentially what we're trying to do in this life as well, right?
Yes, I'm not trying to become like Jesus. The crazy thing is, Sarah, he's trying to become like me.
I knew that, actually. I can attest to that.
You hinted to this idea that men are taught in the church to lead with control instead of curiosity. And the top quote there, I think, I'm not sure if it's from this one, but it might have been from the first one. I might have just, when I copied the slide over, not deleted that. But the second quote is from this one. There is a heaviness men carry alone when the mold they were handed left no room to breathe. And there's that breathing again. And bless their hearts, they've been trying to breathe through a spiritual turtleneck ever since. And it really is. Men are really told and taught to lead the church through control. Mm-hmm. And you describe LDS masculinity as righteousness dressed up as control. How do you think this culture of composure and certainty contributes to the emotional repression and even despair that so many Mormon men experience? I've seen so many Mormon men in the course of the time I spent in the church who really did lack emotional intelligence, felt senses of despair. I remember in a class, I've shared this on the podcast numerous times, but it was during that phase where we had the teachings of the presidents of the church every year or two. We had a new manual.
Yeah.
And Joseph, either F. Smith or Fielding Smith, every chapter was story after story of how amazing he was, how he made desserts for his kids, how he was the greatest dad in the world. And on this side of things, I'm like, that ain't the real story. That guy was more human than I think most people. He had a lot of flaws, but all it did was paint a picture that he was perfect. And I was just in the beginning of my time deconstructing, and I was starting to ask big questions, and I was starting to think outside the box. And we're all sitting in a class reading this, and I raised my hand and said, is anybody else feeling like dirt, like crap for how perfect this guy is? And I put my suit on and I put my tie on, and I come into church and I smile and I pretend everything's going great. But in reality, like, my life has got problems and stuff goes on, and it feels like nothing we ever talk about in these meetings ever really is meant to address that, to help us really overcome something. And I had a hunch if I said it, I might open the door to someone else too. As soon as I got done, the other guy raised his hand and said, I feel the same way that guy does. I am not in a happy place. My life isn't going great. And all we do is talk about how these prophet guys are just about perfect. And it finally got a real conversation going in the room. Your thoughts on what this kind of cultural teaching does to the men in the church, and what we might need to do as a religion to help men develop some more emotional intelligence and to be more capable of holding presence, as you pointed to.
Well, I'm going to take responsibility for Joseph Fielding's teachings because he's my great grandpa. And I can attest to you that he was not perfect. But that's where my perfectionism comes from. He passed that down to all of us, all of my cousins, everyone in our family. We're all perfectionists. However, I know that there's a lot of pressure that comes from that because I felt that from day one. I mean, my mom, every time I left the house, she said, remember, the blood of the prophets run in your veins. So, make good choices out there. So I know though that the imbalance that men feel actually, it's even on both sides, but it starves intimacy. And I grew up watching men I love, my dad, my church leaders, good men carry impossible standards, and they did it in silence. So I love that you brought that up in elders quorum or whatever meeting it was in, because men tend to be praised for their composure and not their connection. And what you did in that meeting is you offered that connection, and it just takes one brave person to stand up and say, this doesn't feel real, this doesn't feel right. And truly, the church, like we talked about, teaches women to endure, but it teaches men to suppress. And both lose so much of themselves. They lose being in touch with themselves when they come from that perspective, when that emotional expression is forbidden. And that's where we come back to, when that emotional expression is forbidden, it finds that back door. And that's why so many men in religious spaces, and obviously not in religious spaces, but they tend to turn towards being workaholics or porn addicts or gaming addicts, because I don't believe it's just about lust or even laziness, right? It's about a relief from the perfection and the shame that is just like smashed down your throats. So this piece that I wrote is really just a love letter to men, because I know that there's good men out there that are emotionally starved. And I do think it's exactly what you talked about, starting with being honest in those meetings and sharing emotionally just how you feel, right? And creating that connection.
They definitely make it. They've designed the meetings. They've designed the flow. They've designed how we only tackle a scripture here or a scripture there, so that we don't read the comprehensive story of Jesus Christ and realize who he's really calling to repentance and who he's really saying leave alone. The church creates a system that keeps things the way they are and makes it really difficult for women or men to step forward and to offer vulnerability and suggest that maybe the way we continue to talk about things isn't as productive as we'd all like to pretend it is. Thomas McConkie once told me that when he goes to church, he joins with everyone else in a collective hallucination, because there's a story about what's going on here that may not actually be reality, and how we could get better, how we should treat others, what are the important skills of life, what are the real check boxes to progress and to become more like God. Anyway, any thoughts from you on that?
That gave me the chills. A collective hallucination. Wow.
Yeah, it was a great comment by him.
Yeah.
Uh,
We're talking about the men here. RFM, any thoughts from you on this essay?
No. I'm still trying to work out a joke. Sarah Steed, that's such a cool last name. And her grandparents actually being John Steed and Mrs. Peel, but it's not gelling.
Is that what was the series in the church?
Yeah.
John Goldberg or
The Work and the
Oh, you're
Glory.
talking about The Work and the Glory. That was
Yeah.
another Steed family, nowhere near as cool as John Steed.
They're not real. They're not real. They're fiction, but I am related to them too.
Was there a Sarah Steed in those stories?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I read them a long time ago, but there should have been.
Yeah.
We'll have to write a Sarah Steed into that.
We'll have to do that. The last essay we just read talked about men. By the way, I love it. You hit one of the essays hit on how young women could be better prepared for adulthood, that the church is really dropping the ball there. We've talked about husbands and wives and the feelings that they've got. You talked about men in the church generally in this last one. And in this next one, I thought this one was really great too.
No, can I ask a question? I was even raising my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. See, I was looking at my screen.
Okay, Sarah, if there were a Sarah Steed character in those what is it called? Light and Glory, Light on Truth. No, what is it?
Work
The
and
Work and the
Glory.
Glory.
Yeah.
Okay. And she's the daughter of the main character. What would that character be like if she were patterned on you?
Ooh. Ooh, that's a hard question. What would she be like now, or what you know what she would have been? I am a completely different person than I was even a decade ago. So she would be transformative. She'd be constantly transforming herself to try to, just be alive in this life and experience it and enjoy it. And that's what I just want to do daily. I just want to enjoy life, because I went too long pretending and faking it and working so hard to be perfect. And I really look back on those times in my life and I feel like I missed out on living. So she would be alive. She'd be fun. But that gives me something to think about now. Maybe I should write a book about Sarah Steed. I don't know, a fictional aspect of myself. You're giving me a lot to think about, RFM. Thank you.
And don't forget the restoration thing.
Yes, for sure. And resurrection, yes.
This last one, you tackle women, specific women in the Relief Society. I thought this was really bold. When sisterhood becomes surveillance. It's about how control in Mormonism doesn't just come from men, but is enforced by women. You talk about that familiar Relief Society vibe where you hope for honesty and air, again, breathing, but instead you get a polished performance of perfection. And then you introduce the silencer, which is that well-meaning woman who's warm, she's calm, caring on the surface, but whose real job is to keep everyone in line without ever raising her voice. I got the very person in my ward back in Ohio in my head. I know exactly the person.
Yeah.
I think this happens in the men's side of things too. There are the enforcers, and they're not as cool and calm. There's sometimes some passive aggressive things said in the spirit of love. But it says here, whose real job is to keep everyone in line without ever raising her voice.
Mm-hmm.
You explain how she's not the villain. She's the system's favorite helper. The institution doesn't have to silence women when it can convince them that silence is their own idea. She's rewarded with titles, microphones, and praise, but only as long as she stays on script. When someone starts to question, she's there to gently steer them back toward compliance, all in the name of sisterly concern. And by the end, you zoom out and you make it clear this isn't about bad people.
Yeah.
In fact, Mormons, I think it's a really good badge that they get, that they're nice people, they're good people. Anybody you talk to who's like, tell me about the Mormons, they're like, I don't know much about that thing. There's some crazy stuff there, I know, but man, the people are so good.
Yeah.
And I think there's truth to that.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's see here. Instead, it's about a system that recruits all of us, men and women, to keep the machine running. You say when enough people finally set the script down, that's when the air clears, and what's left might actually be the gospel itself, real, breathing, free. And the quote here that caught my eye from this one, the system doesn't have to silence you if it can convince you that silence is your idea. And I thought that was brilliant. You write that the system doesn't have to silence you if it convinces you that silence was your idea. How does this dynamic shape Relief Society culture and women's self-perception within the church? Because they think it's their job to be the bodyguards, the watchmen on the tower.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other, I'll just use some bad language. The other mindfuck here is that the women also, that same woman realizes that her authority stops right here. There's a glass ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
She can't get through it. And at the end of the day, her squashing any criticism, any distraction, and bearing testimony of those who have authority and stewardship is the only way that she gets the patriarchy to lift her up to any degree.
Yeah.
Anyway, your thoughts on this essay?
Yeah, well, I was the silencer. So I started realizing as I've come to a lot of these awarenesses through my own healing. But I started realizing that in Mormonism, and I know they call they like to be referred to as LDS now, but I realized that the control isn't just top down, which is how we think it is. I do think it's horizontal as well, which means, and that's how I came up with the silencer, because it does travel through women as well. And the way of naming that dynamic, I could only come up with a silencer because she's like you said, she's not cruel, right? She's actually very beloved, and she believes in keeping the peace and keeping the script intact because that's her job. And the system figured out that it doesn't need to police women, right? It really doesn't, because it doesn't need to police them when it can train them to police themselves. And women do that. We police ourselves. And so I know that men a lot of times get a bad rap and they get associated with patriarchy, but it's not patriarchy. Patriarchy doesn't just affect women. It affects men equally. And women are really good at it. In fact, we do it beautifully. We have the empathy, we have the scriptures, we have the cookies, we got the doilies, we got the centerpieces, we do all the things. And because I've been her, I know what it feels like to be rewarded when you're agreeable. But I also know the grief that comes with the realization that you've been enforcing I guess I could say it, someone else's comfort at the expense of your own truth. So, and the comfort is the patriarchy. And again, the patriarchy is not the church. It's not the gospel. It's the learned behaviors that society has infused within all aspects truly of life as humans. But I love that this piece resonated with you, because I think it's important to note that it's not just men. Men are not the ones within the church that are really the enforcers. A lot of times it's the women. It's both.
Yeah, there have been plenty of moments in my experience as a man in priesthood where you ask a question, you point at an anomaly, a contradiction, you say a thing that's true, but which isn't the gospel path that they want you to be talking about. And like the Relief Society woman that you speak about here, there's a handful of men who stand ready to put things back on track the moment you do anything that doesn't look like correlated Mormonism in a priesthood during that hour. And it does happen on both sides. There was another quote here too. The institution shapes her so thoroughly that to question it would be to unravel her own identity. The silencer, and this is, the question, the silencer believes she is offering compassion even as she's enforcing compliance. In Mormon culture, where empathy and obedience are often conflated, how can women and men discern when the defining of love is actually a form of control? And it really is. I mean, we love people into obedience. That's a Mormon concept.
Yeah, we're good at that.
What can women and men do to discern better what real empathy, real kindness, real compassion, real love would look like?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. I mean, the silencer really thinks she's loving people back into line. In our world, I think love and obedience get kind of tangled. You can't really tell them apart. We're taught that control is care, right? And we're taught that submission is peace. But real love, which I think is the desire deep down, but real love doesn't need compliance, right? It needs connection. So, you I'm sure you can feel the difference. When you're being controlled, it shrinks you, whereas love expands you. So control sounds calm, but it vibrates. It has this underlying vibration of fear. And when someone says, I'm just trying to help, what they mean is, please stop making everyone uncomfortable, or stop making me uncomfortable. And that's not love. I think that comes from a place of maintenance, and maintenance isn't ministry. And we're all about serving each other and ministering to each other. But love leaves room for truth, and love is freedom, not management. You can't nurture someone and manage them at the same time.
Yeah, very, very true. RFM, anything on this one?
No, not really. Just listening and enjoying the conversation. I certainly read a number of these pieces, and some that we're not covering today, and I thought it was very, very well worth the time spent.
Yeah, I thought you were very thought-provoking, and I thought you made connections that I would never have made, but when I noticed you making them, they help spark thoughts and ideas in me. And so I do want to say appreciate your writing style very, very much. I want to invite, if anybody wants to come into the show and ask Sarah a question, now would be the time to do that. I did put the link in the live chat so folks can. But I did want to give you a few minutes. By the way, I'll just note to you as well as to the audience, down in the YouTube description for the episode below, you'll see links to each of these essays and to your Substack as a whole. And folks should know, if somebody wants to, I mean, they can become sort of a supporting member of your Substack, or of Substack in general. But also they can sign up for the free tier, which I was able to read all of these. But I did want to give you a second to point people towards your work, and anything you want to say about where people can find you, find your writing, and get a chance to get to know kind of the thoughts in your head better.
Yeah, I would love anyone to follow me on Substack. I post all of my writings on there. Sometimes I will pick a couple and post them on Facebook, but if you, the majority of the ones, or all of the ones that I write, are usually on Substack. And yes, you can sign up for free. And anytime I post one, it'll come directly to your email when I post a new one.
And somebody, oh, go ahead. Please finish your thought.
That's where you can find the majority of my stuff, or on, you can follow me on Facebook as well. I'm on Instagram, just not on there very often.
Yeah. Somebody's asking, how does Substack work? I sort of perceived it as a blog. Is that sort of what it is, or is it different than a blog?
It's kind of like Instagram. I'm not good at social media at all, but I'm getting familiar with it a little bit. It's, I guess it could be like a blog, but it's for writers basically only. And so writers will write stuff and post on there. And if you are a subscriber, then it just goes directly to your email, to your inbox. And so you don't have to necessarily get on the app, Substack app, in order to read any of my content or my new content. I guess if you want to read my old content, you can click on the links and it'll take you there, and you just have to subscribe, but you don't have to pay. You can do it free.
And you just had a new one come out, didn't you? I just got a message from you.
Yeah. I think it was yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah.
What is the name of the new one?
Oh, it just left my brain.
I'm looking at my email now to see if I can.
Let me look it up. It's about, I can't remember exactly. It's the if we're equal, then why are all the keys in his pocket?
Yeah, that's what it was.
Something like that. Yeah. So just talking about, the keys of the priesthood and whatnot. And it's kind of a feminist perspective, although I don't consider myself a feminist, because I don't necessarily like the concept of tearing men down to try to be equal. I think we should equally rise together. But it's just a different perspective, like the majority of my writing is.
Love it. Love it. All right. We do have a few people here in the studio. So Ruben, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you. How are you guys?
Excellent. Excellent. What thoughts do you have or questions for Sarah?
Hey, so I love your content. I just heard it now, and I am an active member, so to speak. And I'm trying to figure out the best. Well, I think, how do you handle, or in your view, the best way to handle people that grew up in the culture? I'm a convert since 2023, because it feels like they almost short circuit at the level where their like emotional or spiritual development stopped. I've often attributed to the curse of, why I call it the curse of 132, because it feels to me like spirit is feminine, and when you basically the polygamy aspect of it, in my view anyway, made it outward and downward, which should have been inward and upward. Yeah. And so all that is to say that it seems like they almost short circuit at a point where I think the hyper materialism maybe took a hold of them. And I guess my question is, if you've like the most gracious way and loving way, do you think, to approach the situation? Because on one hand, they're it's like a broken heart, it's an open heart, but it's like they can't feel their feelings, just like, I'm sorry, it's like they can't process their feelings, just feel a lot of emotions. And like the best way to, I guess, navigate that, even, which is actually part of our own scripture, but growing up in the church, what do you think would be the best way to kind of approach it from? Like, because it's tough.
Yeah. The interesting thing, I think, within the church, especially active members that have been active their whole life, is that they identify with the church. It is it becomes their personality. I was very much that way. So if there's anything critical that's ever said about the church, they take it personal in a lot of ways. And that need the hyper materialism that you're speaking about is that need for perfection, the need to be, and that perfection isn't just religiously, it also equates to society, what the expectations of society also in general. And I mean, honestly, I'm sure, not growing up in the church, it's hard to relate to a lot of the quirks and the behaviors of individuals that have grown up within the church. But I would just say, observe, love them from a distance. But also, I think the beautiful aspect of it is observing and understanding that you don't have to get pulled into that sort of way of being. And that's kind of like, I've always had this little, not necessarily jealousy, but this I've thought there was a beautiful aspect of individuals that joined the church later in life, because they had this solid self-image that they didn't have to, their identity didn't have to be wrapped up in the church. And so I think it's a beautiful thing that you are an active member and that you are
trying, because it's tough. I mean, because I guess for me, I guess in your view, well, to me, it seems like the perfectionism to men, in my view, is actually a coping mechanism because they're running from their spiritual emotions. So they're running for their inner child. So the whole gospel, the whole thing is a broken heart and a contrite spirit. And I think to get to that contrite spirit, you have to almost cross the dark night of the soul. So even in Joseph Smith's story, I think when he has intense feelings before he sees Christ, I think that's the purging of his attachments and his trauma and like all these like confronting the his shadow before he sees the face of God, right? And I think on one hand we're almost told this story so much, but we're so scared to cross, I think, the same spiritual thresholds that's depicted in the story. And that's part of my issue too. It's like Sarah Hemla literally translates to radiant compassion, and I'm like, I don't think anybody knows how to read any, like, it's almost, it feels back to the Future and A Wrinkle in Time at the same time, because I'm like, this is true, but what happened? Because what have you done? I'm so confused by even like a calling, right? Like when you tell someone in the real world a calling, it's like, what do you love? Do you love to paint? Do you love to draw, to dance, to teach? Like what speaks to your spirit? And that's going to be a lot of Christ, that's going to be contagious to light the world around you. But then that same language was converted into a funnel, into like a procedural system. And I'm like how it's like written everywhere. It's like, you're not, like, you're supposed to watch out for this. And then it's like, we got microwaved or something. Sorry, I'm just like, I agree with you. It's just like a lot to process, I think, walking through it and seeing kind of both sides. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I love that you can see both sides. And that's a beautiful perspective to be in for you. That actually, I think, would create a stronger testimony and a stronger conviction. In fact, I would suggest you read my very first post writing that I wrote. It's called The Prophet We Thought We Knew, because I think it really emphasizes the shift that we've made within the church, where at the beginning, Joseph being in the grove of trees and having this direct experience with God and having the heavens open, and he's literally communing with angels and God himself, and how mystical and magical that is. And then how the church has kind of, made Joseph this manager and put him in correlated manuals, and kind of dumped him down to a degree where he's more palatable and his wildness is not so out there for everyone to see. And it's created more of a kind of a stagnation in the way,
like lawyer approved.
Yes. Yeah. And but I like that you're seeing that within the church, where we're also, the members of the church are being lawyer approved as well. We are holding ourselves at bay and only allowing a little bit of our expression and who we are come out to play, but the rest of us is held back. And I think that that's unfortunate. I hope at some point we can move past that, right? And we kind of talked about that in this interview today, about letting go of the perfectionism and searching for more depth and realism, the real aspects of who we are. And so, yeah, I'm hoping you find that. I think you can, I mean, I just love your attitude and your perspective, but there are aspects of the religion that can be confusing. I'm not the religion itself, but the culture, I should say.
And the doublespeak too, which is like we're warned about in Isaiah. I think Babylon falls specifically because there's doublespeak, and they're like, you're confusing the whole thing. But anyway, I digress. Thank you so much for your time. You've been amazing. All of you guys, incredible content, and I appreciate and love all your work.
Thank you.
Love you too.
Thank you,
By
Ruben.
the way,
Thank
Bill.
you.
Oh, see you. Bye-bye. Bill, the answer to your question is German.
Yeah. I looked it up. So, again, I don't know what it sounded like, and I'm not picking on Ruben, but it sounded, because I think we pick up these things either in apologetics or
literally translated. Sarah Hemla.
Sarah Hemla.
That's what they call it. Sarah Hemla.
Radiant
Sarah Hemla.
I typed in Zarahemla plus radiant compassion in quotes. I couldn't find anything. And it sounded like he was saying that we know that Zarahemla means radiant compassion. And
Literally.
I'm just going to say,
Literally
Ruben,
means something.
I don't think there's any evidence out there at all that that's the case. So
it's a nice thought, though. But that's why in the Book of Mormon, when Jesus comes to visit the Americas, he says, "Get to the temple. Come on, we got to get out of here.
Get to the chopper." Well, Diamond.
Remember, he appears at the temple in Bountiful, right?
Yeah.
Oh, my Lord. It's Diamond Dave.
Good morning, everybody.
How
are you guys doing?
Good.
Talk about a swift kick to the yak.
Yeah. Day drinking. It's what we're doing today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was listening to your show and I think it's great. I wanted to kind of weigh in because I came in roughly halfway and you guys were talking about the systems of how it affects men and women. And let me pull up the description here because one of the topics includes what a more authentic, spiritually alive Mormonism might look like. I don't know, but I don't think it would be Mormonism at that point because at the end of the day, because I joined the church in 2020 and left a few years later, but is that you, under the scripture, you have this system that runs the culture and runs everything that props up the scripture in of itself, right? So, I think if you were to remove this system, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the scripture and everything else would collapse because the scripture is cultural and the culture is based on the system. Am right. I mean, what do you guys think?
Here's what I think. You know what I think Mormonism needs to look more like? A pulse.
Oh.
A pulse.
That's all it needs to look more lifelike is a freaking pulse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I
yeah.
agree.
Well, I would agree with the leadership needs a pulse because I swear it's the worst Centrum Silver advertisement I've seen in my life. Just all those old guys up there.
But now they've got D. Todd Christofferson. You heard me call it, didn't you? I predicted D. Todd.
Yeah.
I said blood is thicker than water, but the law is thicker than blood. And I started with Bednar, but then I thought, who would choose Bednar to be in their first presidency? Nobody in their right mind. So Bednar actually was off the list. People try and avoid him,
I bet. And another thing I wanted to kind of pick everybody's brains about, because I live in Mongolia and I've lived in other countries. Let's pretend that the system changes, right? The system changes. It's more authentic, more spiritually alive, more empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think would be the ramifications globally? Because from what I'm seeing here, if they were to adopt that, that's actually countercultural, and I can see a lot of people in other countries actually leaving because of that.
Bill?
What do you guys think?
What things do? Mainly before it.
So you're asking if Mormonism became softer, more compassionate,
more inclusive,
would people leave?
Yeah, I'm asking if that's what you guys think, because most members are outside the country, not inside the country.
Yeah.
And when we talk about inclusivity in America, like with the LGBTQ as an example, that's a controversial issue. Here in Mongolia, it's not even talked about at all. Or in Africa, or in parts of South America. So I'm genuinely wondering how the church would look globally if it were to change like that.
Yeah. So two thoughts. One is that on one side of the coin, you have an entity like the Community of Christ who chose to do that and hasn't gained any systemic strength from doing so.
Recently had to sell their temple.
Yep. So they demonstrate that if one becomes soft, more ambiguous, less rigid, less definitive, that you lose the members. Maybe the church becomes weaker. So if somebody wants to make that argument, I think you could. The other side of the coin, I thought about this the other day when RFM and I were talking about Elder Oaks, and you had this clip of Elder Oaks where
Oh, you mean Dallas?
Dallas Oaks. Yeah, Dallas
Yeah,
Oaks.
Dallas.
Oh, we lost Sarah. So Sarah, hopefully you'll come back in. Where Dallin Oaks is crying and sharing a really vulnerable side of him.
Yes.
And when he did that, I felt drawn to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a hunch that if Mormonism, if the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that version of Mormonism, if it had figured out early on how to be prophetic in a healthy way, not that they talk to God and they get revelation and they know right from wrong. They don't. It's clearer. But if they could have been forward thinking with a bit of like, hey, we have prophet seers and revelators, and we're going to be ahead of the world on being inclusive and kind and doing the right thing. I think having leaders like that 10-second moment of Elder Oaks, if they could all encompass that and get us to be forward thinking on the right kinds of things, I think it could have been really, it could have been just as successful financially and numbers wise, and would have made me a lot more proud to be a part of it.
Yeah. And of course, in context, what we saw was a guy being vulnerable who's got a track record, at least 20 slides long, that we did on last week's show, right? He's not a good guy. He just had a bad thing happen to him when he was 7, and he ain't over yet.
Yeah.
And then he let it out publicly. So I appreciate that, but it doesn't clear up his track record.
Yeah. I was naive enough. I come into the church right at the beginning of Gordon B. Hinckley's time as the president of the church. And Hinckley was just as unhealthy as the rest of them. But Hinckley portrayed a lot of public moments where he looked like a good guy trying to lead a good church. And I felt drawn to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can imagine a church where it's full of like Dieter Uchtdorf in the first 5 years of him being in the Quorum of the 12, or Hugh B. Brown, those kinds of people, David O. McKay, even to some extent. And I think if it was led by good human beings who still promoted themselves as prophetic, but did so in a way that we could all get behind it and not feel like we're just shitting on everybody, that it could have been really successful if it done that. The difference between that, what I'm describing, in the community of Christ, is that the community of Christ walked away from its truth claims, because those claims were wrong and unhealthy.
Yeah.
So if Mormonism could have started off with the right claims to begin with, then maybe it had a chance of being something really bold and brilliant. And I'll just note, I don't think no religion on the planet has quite figured out how to do rigid truth claims with a healthy approach. They've either died out or they've never existed, because that kind of success I don't see anywhere.
Well, you can't, because as soon as you have rigid truth claims, you immediately set up a system where people are judging everybody else on not having the correct truth claims, believing it wrong, different, whatever. And so the same thing with works. If there's certain works that you have to do, you set it up so that people will be able to look down on others who aren't doing as well as they are. So that's the problem. And that's why judgmentalism gets baked into religion if you have truth claims or believe that certain works are necessary for salvation.
Yeah.
My theory.
You're right. Inevitably, whatever you came up with as your theology in the beginning that you thought was really good, somewhere along the way, people are going to point out problems with it. And so whatever you came up with in the past has to be really open to criticism from the community and adjustment as needed. And then you've walked away from having a top-down hierarchy, because now other people can point out the flaws in your system.
Diamond Dave, you were talking a lot when Sarah was trying to get back on board. Did you have a question you wanted to ask her real quick?
Yeah, well, it was just the questions I posed to you guys, the same question
What
mainly.
was that? I
Like,
wasn't really paying attention. I'm sorry.
well, so two things. First of all, was do you think Mormonism could survive because of the system that you described props up the scripture and props up the culture? Could Mormonism survive, or would the scripture and everything collapse? Because I think it would. Wanted to know your thoughts on that. And then the second one was, um, assuming it becomes more inclusive and more soft and more empathetic, how do you see that impacting the church globally, where most cultures, including the one I'm in, are much more rigid and harsh than even Mormonism is?
Hmm. Are you asking if Mormonism can survive outside of America?
Well, not just that, like what your personal thoughts are, but like, could Mormonism, even in America, like your thoughts, do you think that it would hold up? Would the culture hold up? Would it collapse? Would it change? What would it look like?
If Mormonism were good, Sarah, would it do
Yeah.
well? Or would it lose everybody?
If they were good?
If it chose a healthy framing, if it was vulnerable,
It
transparent,
allowed everybody in, no matter what they did or what they believed.
I mean, yeah, I think it would thrive even more, in my opinion. I think Mormonism holds themselves back when they're rigid and not willing to be as open as they potentially could be. I mean, that's my hope. I mean, obviously,
Mhm.
I don't, because I think it's a beautiful religion. I think it helps so many people. Um, I'm no longer a part of it, but I do think that it was, it really shaped me in such amazing ways that I would
Mhm.
never want to. I wouldn't have wanted to change that, my upbringing within the church, right?
Right.
And
But on
yes,
the other hand, I'm hearing you say, I love that church so much, I left it.
yes. Well, I was just going to get to that part. There's other aspects that I wasn't so open to. And so, you kind of have to weigh them out, like, make the chart and put all the pros and cons in each section. And I just, for me, in the situation I was in, I was trying to heal from a lot of the trauma, religious trauma, and also trauma from my marriage. And in so doing, I couldn't, because of the perfectionism and because I was a people pleaser, I couldn't stay within the church and heal. So I had to remove myself. And after I removed myself, that's what I was talking about, when a whole new world of teachings and possibilities open up to me, and it actually expanded um, my faith and my belief in God when I stepped outside the bounds of Mormonism, you could say. And because there's so many beautiful teachings out there
Can I
that
ask
aren't
you one question?
okay.
What do you believe now that you didn't believe when you were a Mormon?
Ooh, a lot of things. That's a great question. Um,
Just one thing, the biggest thing.
hmm, the biggest thing, and this is probably what I talk about the most, is uh how empowered I've become as a woman stepping away from the church. And that's why a lot of what I write is about empowering women, seeing things from a different lens, because when I was within the church, I just I truly didn't feel my most empowered self. And so I think that that's the biggest shift. Um, all of my other shifts are probably doctrinal related. That's why I kind of like to tweak doctrine according to what works for me at this point. Just because I'm not within the church, and I don't have to ascribe to certain ideologies or theologies. But and I
I
think
do
that's
know,
the
I do know from what I've read and what you said tonight that you still continue to do that through a Mormon context, like talking about
yeah,
Jesus going from grace to grace. I
right.
think that's section 93.
Yeah. I mean, I was raised in the religion, so it's part of my, cells, the cells of my body. And so I see things through that Mormon lens, through that context. And although as I shift, my perspective is shifting here and there in regards to theology, as I learn different things and different religions and different concepts, but I think it always comes back to kind of the root, which is Mormonism. And yeah, I mean, that's the reality, and that's why I can't necessarily say that I have a resentment towards it, right? Because I think every religion is just trying to open up a doorway to God, and some religions close that doorway. I think it just depends on an individual's relationship with that religion. And I know people that are family members that will never leave the religion, and they shouldn't, because it's working well for them. But for me, I just knew I couldn't continue in my progression if I stayed within it.
Very good. I'm just learning. Can you put that back up there, Bill? I'm just learning a little. Zara originates from Arabic. The Hebrew word for compassion is himla or himla, pronounced himla. Who's talking? Who says this?
This is if you do a search online. So
So
Ruben,
in other words, you got to put not only two different words together, you got to use them from different languages.
you do, and
I
it's
thought Zara was a clothing store.
it's actually Kemla, which is a different word than Hemla. And then if you do say Hemla, you got to have the tilde, and it's still pronounced Kemla. So
You
I
must
don't
have copied and pasted that from somewhere.
it's two different places. So one spot was talking about how Zara means radiant, and how from Arabic, and how the Hebrew word for compassion is that Kemla or Hemla, but it's pronounced Kemla. I'll just say, I don't think this is what Nephi or Lehi was doing when they designed the vocabulary. This seems like a stretch.
You know what would Nephi say? Oh, hey, do you know what Nephi would say if he were being played by Marlon Brando? Come on, Zara.
Well, RFM, you brought up the clothing store. Zara is a clothing store.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I bought a high-end jacket from Zara actually, and got it shipped from Turkey.
You got a high-end jacket in Zara? I've never seen any high-end jackets in Zara.
Zara. Yeah, it is a clothing store though.
It is a clothing store. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's a good clothing store.
May all of you be blessed with a masculine child.
Yes, a masculine child like Diamond Dave.
Well, Diamond, thank you very much. Appreciate you being in the show, and thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Yeah, you do too.
Bye, Diamond.
Bye.
Look out for yaks crossing the path.
All right. Well, we are at 8:15. Sarah, I really.
What about Marzipan?
Oh, I didn't see her. There she is.
I'm looking at Marzipan.
Thank you. Thank you, Marzipan. How are you?
I'm good. I was about to get really disappointed. I thought you were just going to cut off.
He was just going to take off into the sunset, leave you in his rearview mirror.
So I am a regular here, but this has been one of the best episodes. I've loved it so much. I had not heard of you before, Sarah, but I've already subscribed to your Substack, and I think read half of it while we were doing this. I have a little ADHD, so I can multitask. My question for you is, do you know that you're a feminist? Because you ended your most recent Substack by saying, before you say the F word, I'm not a feminist. But in what you're writing about and what you're talking about, you keep talking about systems.
Did I lose you guys? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I can't hear anybody. Good, I can hear you, RFM.
You can hear Marzipan, can't you?
No, I can't hear.
Oh, this is bad because he was really winding up with this long prologue of a question.
How do you hear?
What you want to ask you is this, Sarah. What you want to ask you
I can't hear Bill either. I can't hear Bill or Marzipan. I can hear you though. RFM.
Okay, well, you're blessed among women.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's weird though. I don't.
Not the Magnificat. What I want to do is I want to relay Marzipan's question.
Okay.
Which is one of your essays ends with, I'm not, before you say the F word, I'm not a feminist. But Marzipan thinks your other writings say different, and she wants you to explain.
What, she thinks I am a feminist, or?
Yeah, that's why it
You
says
are a
Marzipan, and
feminist.
underneath it, it says, "You know, you're a feminist?" Question mark.
Okay, so let me explain that, because I don't like to label myself anything, right? I don't feel like I identify with anything specific. I feel like my life is kind of, anything that I've identified in my life has kind of imploded. So, and I always reserve the right to change my own mind. So I know a lot of what I write about kind of comes from a feminist lens. However, kind of what I said earlier is that I wrote in the specific one, this is the one I dropped yesterday, that I'm not the F word, which is a feminist. And the reason why, it's the modern feminism is what I'm referring to. And that is, in my interpretation, that men, or that women, I mean, feminism in general has been a beautiful entity in that it's allowed women to really progress. However, I don't really love the approach that a lot of modern feminism has taken, in that it tries to claw men down in order to rise above them. And I just don't like that. So I don't like being associated with that term in that regard. So that's why I don't necessarily call myself a modern feminist. I do think that I am a feminist. I maybe I don't know what another term would be other than
Radical feminist.
Radical feminist.
Radical
Marzipan
feminist,
suggests.
right? Because I want to join men in rising together. I don't want to tear them down in order to rise above them, essentially.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, to me, that's what a feminist is. And I'm not.
Does that answer
familiar
their
with
question? Because
what-
I can't hear them. Sorry.
Yeah, Marzipan was saying that to her, that's what a feminist is.
feminism
So I'm
is
not sure which one.
about tearing men down.
It's not about
That's
tearing
not
men
what it is.
down, says Marzipan to Sarah Steed.
Yeah, and in
Thank
that
you,
regard,
radio.
I do think that the feminist movement has been a beautiful thing. I just feel like a lot of the feminist, I don't know what the term is, not jargon, that's not the word I want to use, but a lot of the feminist terminology.
Vocabulary.
Sorry, what?
Vocabulary.
Vocabulary that I've heard is very much trying to create sort of this situation where men are seen as less than, men are being stomped on, and to be fair, those specific writers don't necessarily, they don't have a monopoly on the feminist movement, correct? But that's why I, in the end of my previous article or essay that I wrote yesterday, that's why I did put that I'm not a feminist, because
You know, since it raises questions, your next essay,
yeah,
you might
I know.
consider
That's
explaining
what's
that.
explaining that, and that's really what inspires a lot of what I write is questions like this, Marzipan, where I can think through it myself, and really come to an understanding of what I believe and then write about it. So I don't know, you're giving me some things to think about. I probably need to find out what kind of feminist I am before I say I'm not a feminist. But I do agree with the feminist movement in general, in that we've made a lot of progress as women in empowering ourselves in many ways. But I love men. I have a son, and I want men to be honored just as much as we're willing to honor ourselves in progressing forward.
Okay.
Marzipan, can you hear me
RFM?
still?
I can hear you, RFM. Can you hear me?
Yes, I don't know why I feel the need to yell. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Would you just thank her for coming on and for taking my question?
Yes.
She's been amazing.
Sarah, Marzipan says, thank you for coming on. Thank you for answering her question, and you've been amazing.
Oh, tell her thank you. I
Okay,
appreciate
Marzipan, Sarah says, thank you.
She can hear me,
heard
right?
her.
No, she can't hear you.
Oh, she can't hear
I'm
me.
the only one that
I'll
everybody
talk to
can
you
hear.
guys later.
I have
that's-
all power.
You're
Bye,
omniscient.
Marzipan. Bye, Marzipan. That's a German confection, by the way. We got a theme of German running through there. No one who
I
speaks German.
love
could
that
yell
name, actually. That's a cool name.
Yes, it is. Krabopolis, marzipan Krabopolis. Sarah,
Mhm.
Sarah, I have been given instructions by Bill Reel. Says, RFM, close out the show since she can't hear me. You can't hear Bill either. Can you not hear
No.
Bill?
Yeah, she can't.
You guys, is this my technology? Because obviously I've had a hard technological experience. I'm sorry, I'm just not technologically. It doesn't come
Technologically.
natural.
Yeah.
I'm
I have to
not
say that a lot
technologically.
in sentences that are exactly like that.
I know.
It's like the first thing you learn to say in a foreign language is, I don't
Yeah.
speak this language.
It's hard. I don't speak it. It's fine.
Sarah, so I've got to let you go. Is there anything you want to say in departing? Once again, that's
No.
Sarah Steed, Essays on Faith, Womanhood, and Becoming,
Yeah.
Substack that's the ampersand, at the Sarah Steed. Okay, that's at the Sarah Steed. And Facebook, you can find her there at Sarah Steed.
hmm Yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me on. You guys have been great. This has been an honor, honestly, and it's been a privilege to meet both of you. You guys are fun. I enjoyed
Yeah, well,
the
thank
chat.
you. Thank you. I'm the glum one. Bill just makes me look fun. Now, hang on a second here. I want to show you something before you leave, okay? I'm going to get rid of that. Here's your grandparents. Here's John, Steed, and Mrs. Peel.
I love them. They're so
Right
cute.
there.
Look at them. Okay.
You haven't seen pictures of your grandparents before, huh?
No, but remember, I'm going to write a book about them.
And her name is Emma, so it's a total Mormon name.
Yeah, that's perfect. I
All
love
right.
the outfits too. They're
Very
cute.
good. Well, I'm glad that you do. So anyway, I've got to let you go. So Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
Godspeed
having
to
me.
you, and keep writing because you're wonderful at it.
I will. Thank you so much for having me on, you guys. Take
All
care.
right. Good night. Good night, Sarah. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back here next Friday night. This is where Sarah leaves the show. Just get her out of there. Here, there you go. Thank you. I just need a big hook. Get Sarah off the stage. Okay. So everybody, we're going to see a Friday night. It's going to be exciting. We may have something special for Friday. So it may not just be people calling in. We may have an actual presentation to tell you. It may involve Lauren Matthias, and it may involve a lot of other really exciting, interesting stuff that you probably won't want to miss. Okay. So just letting you know, it's 8:00 p.m. Mountain Time Friday. And then Saturday, I hope to have another Radio Free Mormon up. You know, that one with Julie Hanks. Dr. Julie Hanks is just going gangbusters. I think it's up to 25,000. It might be up to 26,000 now, which I, ascribe entirely to Julie Hanks, by the way, just so you know. Okay. So Bill, you got anything going on that you want to talk about? Or can anybody hear you? Can we hear you?
There'll be episodes of the Almost Awakened podcast that are already plotted out, probably recorded this weekend and probably come out on Sunday morning. We're putting out something pretty much just now every day of the week, and it's great. So you can look forward to that. Otherwise, nope, I'm really excited about Friday night, and then we'll be back on Monday for the newscast.
All right, everybody, stay safe, be good, and we'll see you Friday on Mormonism After Dark. Good night, everybody.